Hi there, everyone. Welcome to the Daily Gardener. I'm your host, Jennifer Ebling. It's August 21st. How do you start adding living mulch to your garden? One of the simplest ways is just to look for the spots in your garden that are bare. Look for the open areas and start there. Look under shrubs, look along the edges. Instead of adding another layer of mulch, add plants. Think about planting these living mulches in terms of planting families. In other words, planting in a mass. This is what ecologists do naturally. They think about plants in terms of population. New gardeners tend to think of a plant and not a planting. So think bigger, think community. Think about the way you see plants occurring naturally. Even the weeds tend to show up with their brothers and sisters. If one finds purchase, they send out an Evite, and the next thing you know, there's a family reunion of Canadian Thistle or Creeping Charlie, and you get to be the host. And it's right about this time of year that I remind myself how much I like the giant allium, and how fervently I wish I would have planted that allium as a member of a very, very, very large extended family, the Everybody Loves Raymond kind of family, because one can never have enough allium. Here's today's brevities. Today is St. Bernard Tolomeo's Day, the patron saint of olive growers. St. Bernard was from Tuscany, and he was born there in 1272. He was going to be a lawyer, but then he pursued the church after he recovered his eyesight after an illness. He'd made a deal with God. He chose the name Bernard after the habit of Clairvaux. We mentioned him yesterday. He's the patron saint of bees and beekeepers. Tolomeo is the patron saint of olives because the Abbey, St. Mary of Olivet, where he lived, was also the site of an olive plantation. And here are a few quick fun facts about olives. Olives are a fruit and not a vegetable. The first olive harvest occurs after 15 years of growing, so the next time you're feeling impatient about a plant, remember the olive. Olive trees are some of the oldest living plants on Earth. They're considered evergreens. One of the oldest is on the island of Crete, and it's estimated to be about 4,000 years old, and it's still producing fruit. Finally, the color of the fruit is completely dependent on the maturity of it. Unripe fruit is green, and the ripe is dark purple to black. Here's today's brevities. It was on this day that the botanist George Taylor died in 1891. He had emigrated from Scotland. At the age of 53, he'd brought his family to the United States, and he settled in Kalamazoo, Michigan in 1855. His brothers were already there, so it was an easy decision. Once he got settled, he became known as Celery. People started calling him that because he started growing it commercially in the United States. Kalamazoo had what was called muckland. That land was valueless for anything other than growing celery. Later, when a botanist visited the area, he said that the land was pure black muck and peat, which is the perfect condition for growing celery. In Kalamazoo, there's a little plaque dedicated to George Celery Taylor. And thanks to Taylor, Kalamazoo became known as Celery City or Celeryville. In 1880, the Detroit Free Press shared an article that talked about the celery beds. Driving north from Kalamazoo through the country, one passes great 100-acre farms devoted to the sweet-scented celery, reminding us of that Methodist hymn, "Sweet fields beyond, stand dressed in living green." One would never forget a drive through the celery gardens in any direction from Kalamazoo, the long rows keeping their bright green until November, as crop follows crop, and the fields being unmarred by fences or anything except the cozy cottages of the thrifty Hollanders. And there was a fun little article that was posted in the Herald Press out of St. Joseph, Michigan. In the fall of 1856, there was a big party that was going to be held at the Burdock House Hotel. And Mr. Taylor thought it would be a good opportunity to advertise celery. As an unknown vegetable, he persuaded the owner of the hotel to put it on his menu, and people were curious about it. They asked, "How do you eat this? Is it grown from seed?" And it just grew in popularity from there. In the 1870s, the celery growers would have children sell it in the street, which created a demand for celery, and they also met all of the trains that came into town and had them try some of it. They would give it to the conductors on the New York trains and ask them to take a bunch, and the next thing you know, the market for celery was off to the races. And it was on this day that the botanist and German poet Adelbert von Chamisso died. When he was 30, he ended up in Switzerland, and he decided to devote himself to botanical research. In 1815, he was appointed the botanist for a Russian expedition. He collected on the Cape of Good Hope, and he ended up in San Francisco Bay. He wrote about the California poppy, which he named Eschscholzia californica for his friend Johann Friedrich von Eschscholz, who was an entomologist. And in return, Eschscholz named many plants after Chamisso, a little quid pro quo. And today is the anniversary of the death of Dorothy Adlington Cadbury. As a botanist, she was an expert on pondweeds. In 1937, she joined the Wildflower Society, and every year she would write down records, keeping notes, and then she'd send them in to the society as soon as the very first signs of life happened in her garden and in the world around her. Sometimes she sent in those records as early as the first week of March. Dorothy was also a business person. She was the director of Cadbury, the world's second largest candy company. And finally, on this day in 2005, we lost the botanist Mary Bowerman, who was the co-author of The Flowering Plants and Ferns of Mount Diablo, California. Bowerman is responsible for the preservation of thousands of acres of Mount Diablo before she died at the age of 97. She was the last person to record the Mount Diablo buckwheat until it was rediscovered after 70 years in 2005. She was clearly an expert on the flora of Mount Diablo. She spent over 75 years studying it. Her doctoral advisor was none other than Willis Lynn Jepson, the botany man. She was his last surviving student when she died. She wrote once, "Little did I know 65 years ago that my senior project would become my life's work." Bowerman worked tirelessly toward her dream that the whole of Mount Diablo, including its foothills, should remain open space, and that the visual and natural integrity will be sustained. She got her wish. In Unearthed Words, here are a few quotes about August. Here's one from Joseph Wood Crutch. "August creates as she slumbers, replete and satisfied. And here's one from Helen Winslow. The brilliant poppy flaunts her head amidst the ripening grain and adds her voice to sell the song that August's here again. Today's book recommendation is Rosemary Gladstar's Medicinal Herbs. This is such a good book. You get to learn how to make your own herbal remedies, and Gladstar makes it so easy. She's been training herbalists for 25 years at her Sage Mountain Retreat in Vermont. Here's today's garden chore. Try planting cardinal flower, which is known as Lobelia cardinalis. If you have a wet spot in your garden, this could be the perfect plant for that spot. The flowers don't have to be red. It comes in pink and white, and it sends up blossoms for a good 6 weeks in the back half of fall. The plants can handle partial shade, and it's a major pollinator plant. The birds love it, the butterflies love it, even hummingbirds love it. Cardinal flower grows in zones 3 to 9. And before I forget, it's also rabbit and deer resistant. So there you go, another reason to grow it. Finally, here's something sweet to revive the little botanic spark in your heart. Here's a little post from a columnist named Ruth Oren out of a newspaper in Lebanon, Pennsylvania in 1966. I read it and I thought of you guys. So here's this little excerpt with a reminder about not overdoing it in the fall. Midsummer is the time to enjoy a no gardening garden. If you find yourself up to your ears in gardening chores, something is wrong. This pause in midsummer is necessary for humans as well as plants. What's the point of creating a lovely garden and never having the time to enjoy it? Thanks for listening to The Daily Gardener, and remember, for a happy, healthy life, garden every day. The Daily Gardener is produced weekdays in lovely Maple Grove, Minnesota. You can find complete show notes over at thedailygardener.org, and be sure to share the show with your garden friends. You can find The Daily Gardener on all your favorite social media, Instagram, Twitter, and Pinterest, and of course, Facebook. While you're over at Facebook, don't forget to join the Daily Gardener community. Just search for these 3 words, Daily Gardener Community. The group will pop right up, and then request to join. Finally, I want to thank my team at Podfly Productions, where my fabulous editor is Eric Begay. Have a great day in the garden, and we'll see you tomorrow.